Today's question is this. Dear therapist in my pocket, I don't know what to do to find peace. It's the constant battle in my head. I feel as if I'm going mad. My thoughts never stop. Every minute of every day, I'm pulled into one drama after another. It's exhausting me. I have no peace. I dread the day. Someone told me to try a mindfulness app, but it didn't help at all. I really do feel mad at times. How do I get control of this? Can you help? And we do feel mad, don't we? Our thoughts pull us in one direction, then another, like an excited toddler saying, "Come and play, come and look at this, come and do this." We can find no peace from the chatter in our head. And we don't realise that we are existing in that chatter in our head, partly because we don't know where else there is to be, partly because we've never thought about that before. Let's take a bit of time to explore those two things a little more. The first, that we find ourselves existing in the chatter in our head. And the second, that we don't know where else there is that we could be. Do those two observations seem strange? Maybe they're new ideas, unthought thoughts, things that we haven't really noticed or thought about before. Many of us have got so used to being driven by the thoughts that are randomly passing through our heads, being triggered this way and that, dropping one activity because a thought has told us that we need to pick up another, rushing through our day. We've ceased to be aware of the frenetic speed at which we're living and the lack of thought or choice or decision. And so how to do it differently? Well, the first thing we have to do is stop identifying with the mind, to stop believing that the mind is who we are. How about we try thinking of the mind as a toddler, as a playful puppy, as a part of us that isn't quite grown up yet, that is driven by impulse and curiosity, and most of the time isn't even here. Instead of being here, it's off in the past, or it's running into the future, or it's in the imagination somewhere, making up story after story, drama after drama, which if we're not careful, we can believe and get pulled into. Part of this sense of being mad comes from the randomness of our thoughts and our identifying with that randomness, so that we're pulled one way and another without any sense that we can have any say or control in the matter. The mind goes wherever it will, and if we're not careful, it drags us along with it. We have a sense of this happening, but we don't know what on earth we can do about it. Well, there are two things that we can do, both of which help enormously. The first is to learn how to step away from the mind and notice what it's doing rather than being pulled into it. In order to do that, we need to be able to be somewhere else. And that somewhere else is in the present moment, in now. Where do we find now? How do we escape from being pulled into the past, into the future, into a playful imaginative reality that doesn't even exist? Well, now does have a place, and that place is in the body. Allow yourself to just reflect on this for a moment. The body never can be anywhere but here and any time but now. The body always simply is. And so, while our mind is always travelling somewhere else, through time and space, imagination and memory, our body always simply is here, grounded in this present moment. And it is our senses, touch, taste, hearing, sight, smell, that ground us in our body. The idea that we can be present and grounded in our body rather than existing in our thoughts, to many of us, is a totally new idea, as is the notion that we can't be in two places at one time. And so, if we are in our body, fully present and grounded, aware of our breathing, of our heartbeat, of what is happening in our body, we cannot at the same time be going off in all directions, which is what leads to the feeling of having no peace. And when I say this, I don't mean in any way to dismiss the value and importance of the mind, but rather I mean to suggest that the mind needs to be our servant and not our master. It might be helpful to use the analogy of a kite. And we think of the kite flying up in the sky as the mind. There are so many positive aspects to being up there, flying above everything. There is an overview to be had. There are lots of different perspectives to be had. There is a big picture available to the kite flying up there that can't be had from being on the ground. At the same time, up there, the kite is at the mercy of gusts of air, at the whims of the wind. It ducks and dives, going first in one direction and then in another. It's rarely still, and it goes wherever the wind takes it. And so, while being a kite is great fun and full of adventure, a kite really can't be relied on to know what it's doing, to be steady, to know what direction it needs to go in. Crucially, we really mustn't let the kite be in charge. As anyone who's flown a kite knows, you really have to keep an eye on what's happening with the kite. You have to be holding the string all the time, pulling one way and the other, communicating to the kite so that the kite doesn't suddenly pitch down and hit the ground or drift off out of control. Using that analogy of the kite, this is what's happening for those of us who feel we're going mad and that our thoughts are out of control and that we have no peace. The kite is in charge and we're not holding the string. In order to be in charge of the kite, to fly the kite successfully, to enjoy the kite without being controlled by it, the body needs to be monitoring what's going on. That concept for many of us is a new and confusing one. We've come to believe that the mind is the highest authority, and we don't really factor the body in very much, if at all. And yet, without the intelligence of the body, crucially the intelligence of the heart, situated in the body, the mind is really like a kite and out of control. So often, when a client struggling in this way contacts me, the first thing I notice is how often they're telling me what they think, and how rarely, if ever, they are aware or able to tell me what they feel. They are, if you like, existing just like the kite in their head, and are not aware that grounding and steadiness requires the body and awareness of the body. The information of the body and of the heart is 50% of the information we need in order to be fully aware, to make good decisions, to know what we want and don't want, to know who we are, to be able to process reality and think about it. If we observe that the mind is like a toddler, a puppy, like the kite drifting in the wind, blown this way and that, then where is the parent? The parent is the heart. And the heart is situated in the body, informed by all the sensations, signs, signals, and messages that the body is so good at picking up. So, in answer to the first part of our question, where can we be if we're not in our mind? The answer is we can be connected to our heart and in our body. Recent research into the electromagnetic field of the heart has demonstrated that that field is far bigger than that of the brain, and that the heart possesses an intelligence of its own that can be observed in the embryo way before the brain even begins to form. We've come to glorify the brain and thinking, the kite, and we have forgotten what's been known and recognised for millions of years. While the words and phrases remain, heartbreak, following our heart, we've forgotten or lost touch with what heart-centred living and heart-centred practice really is. Ask most people what they're feeling, and they will tell you what they're thinking, and there will be no awareness of how inaccurate or how incomplete that information actually is. This is to be like the kite, blowing this way and that in the wind. The brain in reality is simply a receiver and processor of vibration and electromagnetic information. In itself, it possesses no inherent intelligence. Recent cutting-edge research would even question whether the brain is the seat of consciousness. So let's now return to the body and the importance of the body in managing the mind. And let's consider where true intelligence, our truth, actually lies. How do we know when something feels right? How do we appreciate that something resonates or doesn't? Is it the mind that tells us this? Or do we locate that information in the body? I would suggest that the answer to that is in the body, because feelings are sensations, and sensations arise in the body. How is this relevant to the question of feeling out of control, of our mind dominating our day-to-day living to the point where we feel mad? The answer is simply this. Without our thoughts being grounded in the body's intelligence, we have no way of knowing whether they feel true or not, whether they feel right or not, whether they are aligned with what we want to do or be or not. So often we rely on what we should do, what we ought to think, what other people would do, and these are all thoughts. They are not feelings residing in the body. And so just like the kite, we blow this way and that, ducking and diving, being pulled in one direction and then another, and exactly like the kite, being entirely at the mercy of every gust of wind that blows. So how do we make this stop? How do we change it? How do we take control? How do we find some peace, some steadiness? How do we ground ourselves in the way that the person asking this question is trying to do? We have to do two things. The first, we have to reconnect with our body's intelligence and learn to use it well. And secondly, we have to engage with our consciousness, which is separate to our brain, separate to our mind, and is able to observe what's going on rather than be in the thick of it. We have to become aware. So many of us try to battle our thoughts, to engage with our thoughts and argue our way through. Part of the sense of going mad comes from the constant conversations and arguments and battles we find ourselves having in our head with a kite. Can you take on board the sheer impossibility of ever winning that battle? And at the same time, appreciate what a pointless battle it actually is. Our mind, the kite, is concerned with ideas, imagination, memory, assumption, anticipation, and is constantly working things out, is constantly in the process of working things out. Our heart is concerned with feelings, reactions, inner knowing, inner being, our essential truth, and is informed by the sensations that arise in our body to help it know what it is that we're actually experiencing. Both are helpful. They are two sides of a crucial coin, which together offers the information that we need. And so, what of the string? What of that essential piece of equipment that joins the kite, the mind, to the source of feeling information, the body? What might we call the string? Could we maybe think of the string as our consciousness, as our awareness, as the part of us which is able independently and separately to observe what is going on and to reflect upon it? Again, for those of us who feel trapped and imprisoned by the busyness of the mind, this can be an entirely new thought. How is it that we can observe and think about what we're thinking, or what we're feeling, what we're wanting, what we're not wanting? How is it that we can observe those things and not simply be immersed in them, taken over by them? Well, that capacity lies elsewhere, in a different aspect of us entirely. In the part of us that always exists, always has existed, always will exist, that is not reliant on either the brain or the heart, but exists in its own right as the consciousness which watches and observes. When I first speak of this aspect of us in that way, people can often feel quite alarmed or disturbed. They might speak of it as being a bit weird, a bit strange. But that's only because when we are engulfed and consumed by what's going on in our head, we forget to notice that we're also capable of looking on and observing these processes in every single moment. If that were not so, how could the person asking this question manage to describe what's going on in their head at the same time as experiencing it? How is it that we can be both immersed in an experience and yet at the same time be observing it and thinking about it, reflecting on it, aware and conscious of what is going on? What is that part of us, and how can it help us in a situation like this? Let's go back to the kite. What's the function of the string? Well, the string connects the mind, the thinking part of us, with the heart, the body, the feeling part of us. It receives and is conscious of the information coming from both. However, at no point does it lose itself in either. While it connects the kite flying high and the body grounded and steady, and is receiving and informed by the information from both, and can choose at any time to be more or less aware of either, at no point ever does it become the kite or become the body. If we go back to the question, we can think of ourselves as the string. As the string, we are capable of observing the mind without being consumed by the mind or being taken over by it, and also of observing the information that's coming from the body, from the heart, in order to be informed by it. And to do this effectively, we need to find stillness. The only place that we can find stillness is in the body. The mind is too busy, too erratic. It is never still. Stillness comes when we connect directly with our life force, which is the breath, which is experienced in the body. Anyone who has practiced mindfulness or meditation will know that these practices involve focusing on the breath. It's easy to think of that simply as a way of aiding concentration. And of course, it is a very good way of doing that, a very effective way of stilling ourselves. However, many of us come to find that when we concentrate on our breath and are fully present in our body, we become aware of so much more. Often, we begin to become aware of energy fizzing in our body, often of energy moving through our body. We feel the fizzing particularly in our hands and in our chest and around our heart. And as we become increasingly aware of that, we become increasingly less aware of all the busyness that is happening in our mind. In the language often used by spiritual seekers and mystics, we have moved from mind to no mind, and from no mind to connection to the cosmic mind. we become increasingly aware of our breath, of our heartbeat, of the energy moving through us. And in that stillness of pure awareness, the busyness of the mind ceases to be relevant at all. We find ourselves in a place of pure knowing, being, rather than thinking. What was thinking has given way to conscious awareness, to observing rather than reacting. So, how is all this remotely relevant to the question that's been asked? We can't sit meditating all day, can we? We need to engage with life. We need to live. There are tasks to complete, things to do, places to be. And yes, that is absolutely true. Maybe it's more about the way we do these things rather than the fact that we're doing them. Are we doing them like the kite, blowing this way and that, triggered by every gust of wind that blows? Or are we doing them with awareness as an observer, grounded in the wisdom and information of the body? Have we learned that we can be both the experiencer, fully receiving all the information of an experience, and at the same time the watchful observer, looking on consciously, not pulled in to anything that's happening? The more grounded in such awareness we become, the less we are at the mercy of the toddler or the playful puppy or the kite, pulling us in all directions and giving us no peace. And the more we plug in to that experience of the consciousness that we actually are, the more easily we can unplug from the busyness, from the sense of going mad that this questioner describes. So let's sum up. We are not our thoughts. We are the observer of our thoughts. Equally, we are not our body. We are the observer of the sensations and experiences that are taking place in our body. Just like the string, we can be aware of both, experience both, and observe both, without becoming either. In order to do this effectively, we have to slow down. We have to become mindful. We have to taste stillness. Unless we do this, the mind will be our master and not our servant. The secret lies in the practice of becoming aware of the breath. We have to practice becoming conscious rather than living unconsciously. We are so much more powerful than we ever imagine. And while we are travellers through and in time and space, we are of beyond. We are not of time and space. We are pure consciousness, pure essence, having a temporary human experience. As such, we temporarily inhabit a body, and we temporarily make use of a brain as a radio receiver and processor of energy, of vibrational information. But in every moment, this is not who we are. We are far more than we appear. Not only is this truth embodied in every spiritual tradition on the planet. It is also supported by latest thinking and research into quantum physics. We now know that all matter is energy vibrating at different frequencies. This, therefore, includes us also. We are not our thoughts. We are not our body. We are the string, holding all the information, processing all the signals, but observing, never fully becoming. It's quite a long and involved answer to what appears to be a simple question. But the essential theme, the essential truth running through it all is this. When we identify with form, whether it be our mind, our thoughts, our body, when we identify with those things, believing that we are those things, we become engulfed and consumed because we have become the experience rather than remembering that we can be the observer of the experience. The more we practice awareness, the better able we are to resist being pulled in and rather to observe and think about what's happening. Focusing on the breath is where the power to do this lies. The slower and calmer and steadier our breath, the greater and calmer our ability to be conscious and aware becomes. When we are consumed by the mind, we hold our breath or we breathe shallowly, and in so doing we become increasingly distant from our ability to observe and to be aware. Slow down and you will discover that not only are you breathing, but you are being breathed, that you are the breath. And you will discover that the mind and the brain and your thoughts have lost their power because you have become what you truly are, pure awareness. And in that is true freedom and infinite peace.